Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us for another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. I'm here with Andrew Kemp from Bearkind on one of our one-to-one mentorship sessions. We just had a really good 15-minute or so conversation around the challenges of running a B2B business, a B2B e-commerce business, and a D2C e-commerce business underneath the one brand, and trying to service those two very different cohorts of customers. And we talked about some strategies and some tactics about how to address those. And I'm going to turn this over to Andrew and let him share from the seat of the pants feel, okay, cool, I've got B2B customers that are trying to gear up for Christmas. What does that look like versus the DTC sales we're trying to do for Christmas?
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. We've got a few problems that we're trying to deal with at the moment. Number one is really how do we increase our sales velocity with our B2B customers? And over the past 3 months, I was sharing with Jason, we've gone from doing 25 to 35,000 pounds worth of revenue with our B2B e-commerce customers. That's recently increased to 40,000 pounds as we've moved from a fortnightly email rhythm to a weekly email rhythm. And I was just trying to work out what should we be talking to customers about. At the moment, we talk to them about educating them and informing them about what's coming, what's about to go out of stock, and just trying to speak to them about, our products. Whereas Jason came at it from a very different perspective, was actually educating and informing is good, but how do you also think about ease? So make it as easy as possible. D2C is very different to B2B. You want B2B customers to buy as soon as possible. And I've always been thinking about that at my top of mind, but I've never been like, okay, how can I just do almost like an Amazon one click for B2B? And so what does that look like in terms of, I will actually do most of the work as the proprietor I'm going to test sending some draft orders and draft invoices to customers. Super sympathetic of where you are, Mr. and Mrs. Storekeeper. We know you're busy with Christmas and preparing. I've made a draft order, which I think is going to sell like hotcakes, or what I've seen sell like hotcakes or something similar. And just thought you might be interested in this. If you want it to be smaller or larger, you can just add one or take one away and just make it as simple as click here. And I'm also going to do a little GIF there that shows, okay, click from the email, click onto the fair page or our B2B e-commerce site, and then click bang, add to cart, order done. And that just removes all worries. And so rather than getting an email thinking, oh shit, I've got another thing on my to-do list, I get an email, I click on the button, I make my purchase, job done, I'm on to the next thing. And bang, hopefully they've got a couple hundred pairs of our socks, which would be awesome. And then I also like the other idea, which was around a default shopping list. So auto generating that shopping list similar to the collection, and just saying, hey, look, this is going to be super easy for you guys. We've got this list in an email. You can add them to your cart, or actually I've done it before, you click here. And I think that that unlock of going from educating, informing to now also include ease as well. So that was helpful, Jason.
Thanks, mate. I think the other thing that we talked about that was so relevant is the fact that the goals of your D2C versus B2B buyers are just so different that it's actually hard when you've got effectively almost like a house of brands type of scenario where you've got this D2C channel and you've got this B2B channel, but the goals of each of those buyers are just like, they're almost the antithesis of each other. When you get a D2C buyer to a website, first of all, they're oftentimes in a browse mode. They don't know exactly what they want to buy when they hit the website. They've got an idea, but they want to see what the products are. They want to browse. They want to look at the photos. They want to look at the descriptions. They want to learn a whole lot more before they make their buying decision. And for that matter, your goal as the seller is, hey, I want them to spend as much time on site as possible. I want them to add as many products to the cart as possible. I want them to visit as many categories or collections as possible. I basically want to make them so engaged with this shopping experience that increases their basket size and basket value. That's the holy grail, right? Because in D2C, you don't know whether they're going to come back and buy again. So you want to maximize that first purchase experience for revenue, unit sales, stickiness. You're trying to aim for very different goals than when a B2B customer comes to your website. Like, your goal should be the antithesis of D2C. It's not how long can I keep them on the site, it's how short of a time can I keep them on the site. How fast Can I get them in and out of the buying experience and get them exactly what they need at exactly the right time with just the minimal amount of information they need to make a buying decision, get them into that cart, get them checked out on account, and boom, job done. So like the whole buying journey is such the antithesis of each other. And that's why most brands that do D2C and B2B eventually have to establish completely separate storefronts for D2C and B2B. Because sure, you can add an extension, you can add an app, you can add Sparklayer, Wholesale Grill, or whatever it is to your D2C Shopify store, which adds things like customer groups and price lists and things like different payment methods for B2B and all. You can do that. You can do that. But because most D2C websites are so heavily optimized for the D2C experience, that when you want to start independently the B2B experience, it's really hard to do that within the context of a D2C focused theme. And so that's why eventually most brands will set up like either a second Shopify storefront with the B2B apps plugged into them, with everything about that design and the theme and the customer journey and the request to quote and all those things completely optimized for B2B on that B2B storefront. Or they'll keep Shopify for their D2C storefront, and they will move to a separate B2B focused e-commerce platform for their B2B portal, one of the two. And sometimes it's a stepping stone process. But that, when people ask me why, if I'm a D2C brand and I want to establish B2B, why would I add a B2B website when I can just add B2B functionality to my existing Shopify website? Yeah. Yes, you can. But again, you're trying to opposite.
Yeah, I'm actually finding that as well. We've got like a WP wholesale app, and we were using Mercado before for this on our Shopify site. But we are struggling to make it a really seamless journey where we can talk to customers in the right way. It's using the same like descriptions that we probably wouldn't use if we were doing wholesale, particularly. But then I'm loath to stomach it where currently we're not really doing that much direct e-commerce B2B. It's all through the platforms at the moment. And is that like a bit of a chicken and egg? Like, do I just need to rip off the Band-Aid and move to the wholesale website? Or would I be better off just saying, okay, fine, I'll stay with this for the moment. We'll grow a little bit more until it could wash its face from profitability. When do you see people move from that like app to Shopify stage, Jason?
It does depend a little bit on their AOVs. It depends a little bit on their overall ARR level. It depends on a few different things. It also depends on profitability. It depends on a few different things. It also depends on their operational nous and their technical nous and their ability to drive and support those two independent web properties, because they are two very independent things. And if you're working with a good agency, or you've got good partners that can own the development and maintenance and enhancement of those independent properties, then I would say that's probably a good time. Also, when you get to a place where you've got really good back office systems, such as an ERP that can handle the independent flow of revenue from D2C and wholesale orders, and those are distinct in the financial systems of how you need to track and report and do all those different analytics functions from a commercial and financial perspective. I think those kind of all go hand in hand. So it's typically a scenario where you'd probably want to be doing at least 25% of your total GMV in B2B before it probably makes sense to invest in a dedicated wholesale channel. That's probably about the sweet spot that I'm seeing in the market. If it's 5% of revenue, it doesn't justify it. Once it gets to a quarter of revs, that is usually substantial enough for most brands that they go, okay, we've strung them along enough and we've brought them along that D2C journey with some enhanced functionality long enough. They're big enough now that they deserve a dedicated experience for just them. And again, there's a lot of factors that go into this. And also the ability to easily system integrate with back-end operational systems, these two distinct separate websites. And that's where at the same time, usually, for example, a PIM system starts to maybe make a lot more sense, because now I want to have different types of enrichment, different attributes, different content and everything associated with my products, whereas a subset of that content goes to the D2C site and a subset of that content goes to the B2B site. Because otherwise, you're going to be manually double handling all that, working in the admin backend of two completely different e-commerce websites, where maybe the only thing that comes from maybe your financial package or your ERP is the name, the SKU, the price, and the inventory. That might be the only four things that come into the e-commerce website in an integrated way, but everything else is manual in terms of product maintenance. and product enrichment, and you have to do that now 2 times on 2 separate e-commerce platforms. It gets to be a heavy lift if you're doing it on your own. So it does depend a little bit on the complexity of back office systems, how big your catalog is, and there's a few other deciding factors. But I would say, like, general rule of thumb is when you get to about 25% of revenue that's B2B, it deserves its own web property.
Yeah, so we're actually closer than I thought. And probably something that I'll probably look to do, I think, in the new year then, and bring that in. That's helpful. Thank you, Jason.
I'm here with Elon on one of our one-to-one mentorship calls, and he's got a fantastic agenda lined up for us today that I thought would be super helpful, especially for those of you out there that are working in the services space or the consulting space or the agency space, and you're trying to figure out, how do I create products and services that will not only resonate with my customers, make sure that I'm leveraging my skills, make sure that I am doing something that's scalable, especially if you're a consultant and you've got limited time. Okay, then do I bring people on? What does that look like? They obviously can't do all the same things I can do. How can I maintain a high level of service? Like, all these questions come into your life the moment you start consulting or freelancing or having an agency or whatever it might be. All of a sudden, these questions become super, super relevant, and everybody has to answer them. And they've all got to, especially when you're on your own, to start off with, before you have a team around you. If you ever do have a team around you, some people I don't want a team around me, but some people do. They want to build a massive consultancy that's got, 150 or 200 or 300 or 500 staff. So you've got to get this right before you can then start piling scale on top of that, right? And that's really what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah, it is so many questions when, particularly as a consultant or starting out as a freelancer, because one of the big things is scaling your time. So that's been a part of my journey where I've been mainly just on my own, and it's been good. And as you said, sometimes you don't want a team, and it comes down to, I speak to a lot of people who are interested in transitioning from corporate to freelance, and ultimately the main thing is, what do you want for your lifestyle as well, is equally as important as what you want to do in the day-to-day. I say that because one of the benefits of freelancing is there's that type of flexibility that you can have where you're managing mainly your own time. But then you do get to a certain point, depending on what you want to do, and this has been from, you can't scale your time. And so there is a certain limit. And one thing, of course, is that as well, when you're growing your businesses, you do work for clients, but you've got to work on all this other business stuff as well, admin and finances and business development. And so that's part of your time as well. So people might see freelancer or contractor rates or think it's good, and there's different models there, but you've got to remember there's a whole lot of other work you need to do to support that business. And so I've just been thinking about what the vision is for me and thinking of the company of one model. And that's where I wanted to get your thoughts on a few things. I think whether you're a freelancer, a small agency, a big company, you just have to have a vision and something you believe in, the strategy, and set those goals, and then not get distracted and put the blinkers on. And I think I'm at that point now where I've really, to do this really well, especially in the service industry where it's about trust and expertise, and you really need to know what you're talking about. And so you need to choose I think specialization is the big differentiator now. I think we've all seen those agency websites where they do everything for everyone. They do service marketing, they do e-commerce, they do your website, they do your CRO, they do your ads. And it's actually not possible, I think, unless you go for a really big agency, which has got its own set of challenges around bureaucracy and handoff points and things like that, a separate conversation. But I think it is about specialization. And I wanted to ask about how you thought about this for yourself. As you said, everyone has to ask these questions around scaling your time and how you think about things like, I've got a retainer model, which is tried and tested. There's things that don't require you, like creating digital products, which is another one. And then there is doing more infrequent or ad hoc, like coaching sessions or speaking or things like that, which kind of all complement each other and have different pros and cons in terms of scalability and using your own time.
Yeah, no, you raise some very good points, and I think the well-trodden path, probably the most well-trodden path that I see, is the retainer model. Now, when I started my business, I intentionally didn't go down the retainer model route, and it was a very intentional decision to do that. And so I wanted to establish a consulting as a service model, which was a fixed subscription fee per month, that just the only wrapper around that, or the only safety net for me around that, was a fair use policy. And that fair use policy is not like a rigid, set in concrete stone thing. It is flexible, and it's very often that when I first start engaging with a customer, the first month is heavily front loaded in terms of the effort and the time for discovery and all that sort of stuff. So I expect within that fair use policy to have to flex up and down appropriately for my clients. But what I didn't want to have, the reason why I went down the consulting as a service subscription model, is because I didn't want to have a situation like what I ran into when I was still a client, early on in my career, especially with consultants, where the retainer model, you never know what you're going to end up paying at the end of the month, because you've got this retainer, and then once you go over it, then they ask for more time, more budget, etc. if you want to get this certain number of things done, and you're almost always having a resource and budget conversation with your customers, like with your clients. And I just did not want to be having that retainer. Okay, you've used 3 out of your 5 hours, or 9.5 out of your 10 hours, or 14.9 out of your 15 hours. I just didn't want to be having that ongoing conversation with clients. And I also didn't want to have to track literally every single second of every single moment of work that I did for that client. And the overhead, the admin overhead associated with that, of just jumping on a quick, I wanted to be available to my clients to be able to just jump on a quick WhatsApp call or a quick Slack chat for 5 different, they'll pepper me with a few questions, and then I'll come back and I'll give them all those answers. I didn't want to have to then go back to my time tracking software and say, well, I spent 15 minutes there and I spent 15 minutes there. The whole retainer model, to me, it feels like it's so heavily loaded in favor of the agency or the consultant that it feels like you're almost nickel and diming the customer to death, right? And I never wanted to be that guy. And the only way that I could figure out how to get around that was to set an all-you-can-eat pricing model. Okay, you subscribe. It's all you can eat, just loosely governed by this fair use policy, to where if you go crazy, we're going to have a conversation about whether that fee that I'm charging on a monthly basis is an appropriate fee or not. Now, luckily, in almost 3 years of doing this, I've never had to have that conversation. People generally are very reasonable. They're respectful of your time. They know that it's open-ended. They know that it's all you can eat, but they're still respectful of that. And I think it comes back to the type of clients that I tend to attract and the types of clients I tend to say yes to. I think that is what has governed a really fruitful engagement model, as opposed to the contracts that are wrapped around that. So I don't even have, unless a client requires it, I don't even have a written contract with my clients, because I feel, man, if you got to lock your clients in via contract, then do they really want to work with you? People can break contracts no matter what the wording says. They can break contracts, and the reality is, unless you want to pursue them legally, the contracts generally aren't worth the paper that they're written on. And so for me, the clients just sign up through my website on a subscription. They get pinged every single month. That automatically bills their business credit card for the fees. So they're paying in advance. They're always paying in advance. And it just, boom, the payments happen. I don't ever chase money. I don't ever chase my clients. I don't ever fight with them. It's, hey, you want to work with me? Great. I want to work with you. Here's what it looks like. Here's what the engagement model looks like. Go to my website, sign up, and we'll schedule in discovery or whatever the next steps are. From the moment you sign up, that's when we engage. That's when we're officially engaged together. And so I think that there's nothing necessarily wrong with the retainer model. It just, the downstream effects of that are really, it's a slippery slope, and there's a lot of unintended consequences that go along with retainer models, right? Now, I understand why most agencies go the retainer model route, because if it was all you could eat, they would have to charge such a ridiculous amount of money, because they have to cover account managers, PMs, devs. They've got to cover admin. It's harder to create a all-you-can-eat model in agency land than it is in freelancer or consultant land. Much harder. But I think for you, because you're currently a consultant and because you currently effectively run your business in a freelance way, I think that consulting as a service would work for you too, and it would probably get you out of that treadmill of trying to sell bigger and bigger retainers. So what I'm trying to do, there's an inherent conflict in a retainer model, or at least it can be perceived as an inherent conflict on the client's side, because what the client assumes is you're going to stretch out work as long as you possibly can to chew up the retainer. That you're not going to hurry, you're not going to be in a rush, your expectations and your goals are not aligned with the client's. Mine are perfectly aligned, because if I can do a piece of work, I'm getting paid the same flat fixed fee every month, if I can do a piece of work for a client that would normally take me 10 hours, but I can find some kind of efficiency to do it in 8, that's, bully for me. That's amazing. That's great. It means I'm bringing additional leverage to my time. And so I think that the consulting as a service model is much better aligned with your desire to do things as quickly and professionally as possible that moves the needle for them as fast as possible versus trying to maximize your return on investment of the retainer that you're billing out at. So that would be my first key point, because I know you've got 4 or 5 things you want to talk about.
Yeah,
but the first one was really the retainer model. So jump in.
Yes. Yeah, sorry. So how does that look like in terms of, have you set yourself, part of that is the unknown about what the client is going to ask you for that month. There is this handshake agreement and the fair use policy, but the reality is that you could just end up 3 clients coming to a busy period and all of a sudden they have a big piece of work. All of them are adhering to the fair use policy, but there's one Jason. So how do you think about setting expectations and the number? Like, how do you think about your time? And you don't know how much time you could do you don't know. So how do you think about doing that with the client? And then, my other question was just around your journey to specialize. What does that look like practically, like how you manage it, but also your journey to specialize in B2B, I think is interesting. Did you go through a bit of a process because you were more D2C and B2B and general e-commerce, and did you just go, fuck, this is a no-brainer? Or did you go through a bit of a process of understanding before you had to convince yourself that, okay, I'm going to go for this now. I'm pretty sure it's going to work, but it's chicken and egg. I don't know if it's going to work until I really tell people I do B2B and start to talk at B2B conferences. What did that kind of look like for you to prove out that was the right niche for you to go after?
Fantastic questions. So in terms of time management, I try to make sure, because I very much also concerned not only about the level of service that I give my clients, but I'm also very cautious about preserving time for me to rest, to recharge, to be out in nature, to go running, to be with my dog, to be with my wife, to travel here in Mexico, because I find that I have my most lucid moments, I have my most creative moments, I have my most positive moments, even as it relates to business, when I leave enough free time to be creative. And this ideas will come to me about a specific client project or a specific challenge we're facing, whatever. 9 times out of 10, the solution to that will come to me when I'm out running the dog. It just, or in the shower, or at a time when I'm not sitting down and sitting at my computer going, okay, we've got this challenge. Shit, what do we do? It's when I'm not directly focused on that thing that the solution comes to me. And so I need to preserve quality time in my life to make sure that I'm giving my best self to my clients at every opportunity. That's the first thing. So it's not just how many hours can I do on behalf of my clients, but I want those hours to be quality hours. And that means being very protective of my quality time for my mind and my soul. That's the first thing. Second thing is, if I'm currently in an engagement with 3 or 4 clients, and I know, like, right now we're pretty busy, we're going through lots of work together, it's soaking up a lot of time in a given month, and then I have another client come to me and say, hey, I'd like to start working with you from this month, I'll be very transparent with them. I'll say, look, I want to work with you too, but I want to give you the same level of quality experience, time, and passion that I'm giving to my current clients. And if I take you on now, that will not happen. You will get the leftovers of time. And I don't want that to happen. So why don't we look at engaging starting next month instead of this month? Because X, Y, and Z is going to be finishing, and I'll have much, much more time and energy to really focus on you guys. Does that timeline work for you? If it doesn't, I understand. You may have to try to find someone else. But I hope that you are willing to wait that extra 15 days, 30 days, whatever it is, to delay our engagement out of respect for my existing clients. Just like once we're engaged, I will respect and protect your time too. If somebody comes to me and I'm not in a position to be able to service them because the time is allocated to you, then I simply won't take that work on. And I guess that's one of the other benefits of being an independent consultant, is you can turn down work. If you've got 40 devs sitting behind you in an agency that are waiting for work, waiting for Big Daddy Lion to go out there and kill some prey and then bring it back to the family, you got to take almost every single piece of work that comes through your door. It's almost impossible to say no, because you got to keep an entire team fed. Whereas as a consultant, as you rightly pointed out, the more important things are trust, skill, experience, what kind of treatment you give people while you're engaged with them. Because for me, I'm already thinking 3 steps ahead. I'm already thinking, hang on a second. When I get done engaging with a client, because my average engagement is 3 to 6 months, I never want to be a tick on my client's back. I want to get in. We have a discrete piece of work together. I move the needle in a massive way, and then I get out of the way. And I let the agency partners or whoever it is deliver the actual work. If it's let's say it's a website development or whatever it is, or an ERP implementation or whatever, because I don't do any implementation. So for me, what I want to do is I want to make sure that at the end of that 3 to 6 month engagement, they are going to be ecstatic, to be thrilled to have a short 3 to 5 minute interview with me as part of their exit process out of my business, to where when the next project comes along, they're going to immediately come back to me because they had such a great experience with me. But 2, they're going to do that interview. They're going to do that exit interview as a testimonial that then I can put that video testimonial on my site. And if I don't protect the integrity of the time that I spend with them, then there's no way they'll do that because they'll have a crap experience. So we're very aligned in terms of me making sure that the time that they get with me is super quality time. So that's the first thing. Does that make sense, first of all?
Yeah, it does. It really is. Coming back to like what you stand for as a consultant, or what every good consultant can stand for, is like that trust and transparency, and explaining this is how I operate with my clients, and this is what I'm doing with an existing client, and I want you to have the same. And it just really comes down to having that clear communication. I think as well the 3 to 6 months is good as well. Like a lot of my retainer clients are more ongoing, and we do a little bit of delivery work, so that makes things slightly different. I think it's good the 3 to 6 months because then you can understand like there is a limit to it. We're talking about a specific piece of work that's going to spread out over 3 to 6 months, and I've made sure I've got the time to support you, and that allows you to understand as well, okay, this is what I've got to think about when I decide to take on another client or not, because there will be a finish on that particular work for you. Have you ever been tempted to hire someone like a similar Jason, who could do similar, which would allow you, I mean, you always think about it, right? Like I know you like to grow and you're ambitious. The question that comes up.
100% I have, but 100% I've always decided against it. And it's because it's a combination of factors. For a start off, I'm a control freak, and I realize that. And it's very difficult. Like I'd rather outsource parts of my content, post-production and distribution. I would rather outsource that stuff, or some of the admin parts of my business, like the bookkeeping and some of the other things that I like. I make sure the bank rec is always perfect. There's certain things that I do just from an admin perspective that like I could probably pretty easily outsource. I don't know, I could probably outsource 20 hours a month pretty quickly and pretty easily. And I would way rather outsource that stuff than I would outsource the consulting bit, because the consulting bit is where I make that's like my bread and butter, and that's the differentiator. Whereas a lot of the grunt work in my business, that's easier to outsource than trying to outsource the actual consultancy. And for me, because I've been doing this so long, I haven't really met anyone. There's people that do similar things, but either they don't do it to the depth I do, or they do it in a very different way. And stylistically, I want my clients to have a very specific experience with me. It's just so hard. It's so hard to get someone else to deliver in your name, because it's called Greenwood Consulting. It's not called generic consulting services. And so
it's such a good point. Yeah. And that's where the partners can come in, the trusted partners, because it's one of the biggest challenges I see for agencies is they've got the founders, they start out 2 or 3 people who are very good at what they do, very good on the tools. They want to build an agency. They end up being the person on the pitch. The client loves what they're hearing and saying. I see this all the time. And then inevitably, they need to keep doing that to, as you say, bring in more clients, more revenue to support this new agency they've got, and the 5 to 10 people salaries they need to cover, and the rent they need to cover. So that's their focus, and creating marketing and the sales part of the agency. So the work gets handed off. And there's 2 things I see. There's that knowledge gap. There's 3 actually. What you say, the style can be different. There's that knowledge gap which exists because they just don't know as much or haven't been as experienced. And then the third I see is the good agencies still that can be understandable. If you're signing up to an agency, you know that you're going to have the person on the call, not going to be the person you work with day to day, but you want to know the expertise of the agency is accessible to that person. And that's what I see some of the better, smaller agencies do, where yes, there's an account manager, but the client knows that if that person gets stuck or there's something they're unsure about, the platforms are changing every day and no one knows everything. No one's a complete expert, especially with Meta and Google Ads. Even within niches, you can be an expert on those platforms, let alone just across all of e-commerce or service. But does that person have access to the experts to get a quick answer for the client? Or has it gotten so big and clunky and bureaucratic and political that they can't do that, even though they work in the same company? I think that's what some smaller agencies can do a better job of at least bringing those benefits to the client, the combined knowledge of what the agency actually has. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And I've seen it even in agencies that I've helped run, where the sales rep or the agency principal or the founder or the CEO, they're often involved in those sales engagements, and they're impressive. Like they know everything. Or it feels like they know everything. And they're doing these conversations on such a regular basis that they have an answer for kind of almost every objection, every concern.
Exactly.
And then you get handed over too often. You get handed over to juniors. That's the reality, is that juniors should actually be sitting alongside and be shadowed by seniors. And that's how they should be learning, not directly working on client accounts. So that's the thing, is that they should always, it should be your seniors that actually are doing the day-to-day delivery, unless it's an absolutely stupidly simple piece of work that a junior could just do all day, every day. And really, you're just looking for a dog's body to be able to deliver that work. But for anything strategic or anything that requires real true depth of skill, it should always be your seniors that are delivering the work and engaging directly with the client. And then the juniors are there to support the seniors. They're not there to support clients directly. And that's that's the only way I've seen it be able to work in agency land. But there still is a lot of disconnect between the handover between a boss who helps get the client over the line to sign on the dotted line, and then they literally disappear and the client never sees them again. And unless specifically they ask, hey, I want to see the agency principal on our next WIP call because I haven't seen them since we signed up and I thought that they would be involved. So you have to set the expectations super early and super often about how involved that person is going to be. And I think the better agencies do a better job of doing that. That they say, look, I'm not on the tools anymore. I don't do this. I don't do this day to day. I'm trying to help make sure that the team is excellent and gets better every single day.
Yes, this is how we do it. And also, I always recommend get that person on the call. Like you said, get who's my account manager? Can I join a call? Can I get to know them? And before you go ahead. What other questions did you want to tackle, dude? I know you spent a bit of time.
You were talking about how did you decide to go into B2B? And I think that's a really relevant question. There was two primary factors that made me decide to focus and hone in on First is I had some very good experiences in agency land working with a few pretty large scale B2B clients. And I loved those projects mainly because they were of such a much higher level of complexity that I was working with operators within the business, not marketers. So generally, when you're in an agency world and you're working with D2C and B2C brands, you're almost always you're working with the marketing team. That's primarily who you engage with. It's very rare that you're going to work with the ops manager. It's very rare that you're going to be working with the finance manager. It's very rare that you're going to be working with somebody that's technical, the CTO, the CIO. It's very rare that you're going to be working with these operators within the business, and it's more likely that you'll be working primarily with the marketing team. Now, I don't necessarily have anything against marketers, but unfortunately, there's often a massive disconnect between what a marketer wants to achieve and what is reasonable technically to deliver. And if they don't understand technical stuff at all, you have to speak at such a basic level with them about the technicals that it almost comes across as condescending. And there's just this massive disconnect between consulting to a marketer and consulting to an operator. Massive difference. And so I've always enjoyed the complexity, the breadth and the depth of B2B commerce engagements. Plus, I've enjoyed the type of people that I typically engage with. So I'm a primarily a technical and operational consultant. I am not a marketing consultant. So I'm not going to help them run their campaigns. I'm not going to help them develop their marketing strategy. I'm not going to help them with CRO. I'm not going to help them with anything marketing related. So to then be pushed in front of the marketers to implement what is ultimately a technical project, if it's an e-commerce project, that's a really hard discussion to have, because we're having technical discussions and functional discussions, not marketing discussions. And the marketers are like, I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. This is the marketing goals I have. Help me achieve my marketing goals. And you're supposed to tell me the tech that I need to help me achieve those marketing goals. So there's just a big disconnect there. And I always liked the nature of B2B engagement. So that's the first thing. Second of all, when I looked out across the landscape of consultants that were working in the e-com space, I noticed that 90+ % of them were working specifically in the D2C, B2C space. There was very few that specialized in B2B. And I thought, okay, this feels like a massive growth industry. From everything I'm hearing from the market, especially post-COVID, lots of B2B brands want to do this e-commerce thing and they want to get it right first time if they can. And there's really not too many people that specialize in B2B. And even if they specialize in B2B, they don't generally specialize in the entire commerce stack of B2B. So they might specialize in the e-commerce front end and all the front end supporting technology for B2B, but they don't know anything about ERPs or CRMs or CDPs or PIMs or POS or anything else. And so therefore, those consultants are really, they are single faceted. But in B2B land, all of those other pieces of technology are absolutely mission critical to support the front end experience, particularly ERP. And if you don't really understand ERP and you've never solutioned around ERP before, you're going to start on the back foot when you are consulting to brands around B2B, because almost everything in that business comes from the ERP. And so you need to be able to speak competently to that. You need to be able to help them architect a new implementation of ERP if necessary before you get onto e-com. And so there was a lot of factors that pushed me into the B2B space, but it just, more than anything else, it aligned really well with my background, my experience, and my skill set.
And did you think as well, so passionate about it, could see the demand, did you also think, okay, how am I going to get customers? Because what I've observed is you using LinkedIn to talk about B2B in the non-boring corporate way, which I think for those like myself, who's D2C, who's e-commerce, who's marketing, you don't really see much of that. It can be hard. It is interesting and exciting because I've done enterprise stuff, but the content and getting people interested is actually quite different to the consumer side.
100%, you hit the nail on the head. You're 100% right on. But I also felt that would be an automatic differentiator for me because I'm a kind of an irreverent kind of guy. I'm kind of left field. I'm sometimes perceived as arrogant, but I'm really just pretty confident in 23 years doing this thing. And I'm a bit cheeky. I like a bit of humor. I like to keep things a little bit light. I don't like to make things feel like we're not doing heart surgery here. Like this is still, at the end of the day, yes, I'm dealing with very large organizations, typically with very large budgets and very large aspirations and very large high ROI expectations of the work that we're doing. So I don't mean to trivialize the work, but I think that there's not necessarily any benefit of getting bogged down in the politics of that complexity when, hey, this is still just we're not launching rockets into space. If we get one little tiny thing wrong, nobody's going to die. And almost everything is fixable in e-com. So even if we overlook, I'll still do the best of my ability over 2 days or 3 days worth of discovery. I'll try to capture absolutely everything related to a project that could possibly get us off course. But first of all, there may be some things that the client doesn't even know, and they need to go away and they need to research about the direction they want to go. And then there's still, even in the middle of all that, there might be one tiny little thing that's in a silo of the business that nobody knows anything about that comes out of the woodwork when they get into implementation. And so you're never going to be perfect anyway. And so for me, I thought my personality probably lends itself to natural cut through when I'm talking about these topics. It's probably going to cut through better than somebody from SAE or somebody from Accenture, or it's just probably going to be easier for me to stand out in this sea of B2B sameness because I am a little bit irreverent, because I am a little bit out of left field, because I make memes, because I do things that your traditional B2B sales dude wouldn't do, right? And so I felt that would naturally play to my strengths anyway, without in the actual engagement leading to me being unprofessional.
Yeah, nice, man. Yeah, I can see, and I think it would, the sameness. I think that's the word. The people just used to the sameness. And so much, a lot of those companies are big corporates themselves. And so all the sorts of things that happen with big corporates, especially the bureaucracy and the politics and like just cutting through all of that and just talking about subject and getting it done in a positive way and not getting caught up too much in process, which is what they use today and slows a lot of things down. I can see that resonating Oh, nice, man. Nice.
Sorry to interrupt. It also creates
Yeah.
an opportunity for you to be a little bit cheeky in the way that and playful. It allows you to be a little bit more playful, even when I'm in discovery, because discoveries, man, they can be
Oh,
dry
yeah,
as a
man.
bone. They
You
can
need
be
to keep the
super
energy up, man. Like,
painful.
what's the point if people are bored, like people are turning off their cameras and not engaged? Like, you've got to, yeah, there's like such an art to getting the energy going and getting people engaged and getting people and making sure also, depending on the audience, but making sure everyone gets a voice as well. Obviously, often the smartest people with the best insight and things to watch out for as you go through discovery it could be developers or people who don't speak out as much, and they're the ones you need to make sure they're. And on the flip side, of course, there's someone with a louder voice who's naturally outgoing and so they talk a lot, which is good. They got insights as well, but you've got to make sure that balance comes through. Make sure you uncover everything.
And I think also, in addition to that, like in the last big discovery I did, there was a very large manufacturer in the United States, and the CEO, who is also the founder of the company, so he still runs the company day to day, and he was planning to only be in the first hour or two of the first day of discovery. He flat out said, look, I don't think I'm going to be able to be here for all of this. I don't think I'm going to be able to be here for tomorrow because I've got these meetings and stuff. And I said, that's no problem. I said, obviously we've got 6-8 people around the table. So I think hopefully between all of us, we'll be able to get all the answers we need to make sure nothing is missed. But he enjoyed it so much. On the first day, he enjoyed the questions. He enjoyed the engagement. He enjoyed the conversation. He enjoyed the banter so much that not only did he stay through the first day, but he sat through the entire second day as well. And he was hyper engaged throughout the whole thing. And to me, that says a lot. That kind of validates my approach to discovery, which is to hopefully make it at least as fun as it can be, given the subject matter that we're covering. Make sure that it's a little bit playful, that there's some fun banter and conversation between themselves and between me, and just trying to make sure that we all realize that there's no such thing as perfection, that progress over perfection is what matters. And if we can help move them off the spot they're at today to a better place, there's no such thing as a perfect place. So it's a process of getting them to a better place as fast as possible. And if we're forcing them to have the hard discussions inside the business, the one of the best things I love is when somebody says, oh, that's a great question. I'm not sure actually how we do that now. I'm not sure. I need to go and talk to Jane or Bob over in this part of the team because I don't know how they do this thing anymore. And there was a lot of that. And I think anytime you can prompt them to ask questions of themselves that they hadn't already thought of, that my boss, I had an old boss years ago, and he said to me, Jason, you knoweth a man by the questions he asketh, not the answers he giveth. And so you can demonstrate expertise far better by asking better questions than anyone else rather than the answers you give instead. And so that's what I try to focus on, asking the best possible questions I can ask.
Yeah. And it's good that, because sometimes with having that environment is so important because you don't want people to feel bad by not knowing, which can happen in a room where it's like, should I know that? Oh, wow. But if you have it in a positive, really that progress over perfection, because perfection doesn't exist, especially with tech. And we're here to find those things. Don't worry about it, guys. If there's things you don't know, you got to figure out. We're winning, like we're working together because it's impossible to know everything. So let's keep that going for the rest of the session. And I think getting the CEO is great with that engaged, because then that just moves you forward on implementation, right? When they're engaged and they've got buy-in and they're part of the process, then you can see that he's able to get things going with the team as well.
And they're the ones paying the bill, usually.
And they're paying the bill. Yeah, they want to see. Yeah, exactly. They want to see what they're getting. But getting the engagement going is, especially for a CEO to take a couple of days out. They're so busy with everything going on.
Especially when they're a big manufacturer, for sure.
So what you're saying is it's all about the memes. You have good memes at the beginning of the session. You get some jokes.
Crack a few jokes at my own expense, usually, and then we go from there.
Nice.
And I'll tell you the other thing that I do before I start out a discovery, like the first, say, 20 minutes of discovery, I ask the leadership of the business, if it's the founder or if it's the CEO or if it's the leadership team or whoever's the buck stops here person in the business. It could be a GM, it could be something. I'll usually start out with something like, before we get into the nitty gritty of all of this, before we dive down deep into the weeds of all these different departments and functions and processes, Can you just tell me from your perspective how this business came into existence, why it came into existence, what it came into existence to solve for? Has that mission changed between then and now? What is your future vision for the business and its place in the world? Give me the 30,000 foot view of this company, its current state, its originating state, its future state. Kind of just let me in on the culture of how this business was born and what it was born to be. And just help me understand that culture of the founding culture of the business and how you've helped to build that, maintain that, and extend that over time, so that I get a better understanding of what we're building towards. Sure, there's technical goals, there's all these different goals you have that they're going to form part of the success factors that we're going to measure this project by, but I'm talking even higher than that. What are some of the ambitions? What are some of the aspirational aspects of the business that will help me be more empathetic about where you're trying to go? And I wouldn't be able to say that if I worked with large corporates or if I worked with public companies, I couldn't have those conversations, which is why I don't work with large corporates. I do not work with public companies because I cannot ask those questions and get a reasonable answer, because I got 86,000 layers of bureaucracy between me and the person that would be able to give me that answer. And so the size of companies that I work with, my ICP was designed very deliberately so that I could build that camaraderie and I could build that alignment at a senior level in the business, because the business is still small enough. They could still be doing 200 million a year in business, but they don't have to be a big bumbling corporate at the same time. Those aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah, it's talking good questions. I know Rick Watson, who I've seen you comment, does some really great stuff on LinkedIn, and he did a recent post about consulting, and you've just highlighted like the best questions to start at the beginning, just really understanding the business, showing the owner you're interested, and for you understanding, because that allows you to do your job better. But towards the end, like he said, I asked people like, who cares about this information? And he said that question is designed to understand, particularly for when it's strategic consulting and not implementation work, like if we do all of this and here's what I can do for you, like who cares? So they're invested in actually, and you know that there's someone who can get the outcomes from the experience and strategy that you're going to hand over to them. I thought that was like a really good, it's good. I know Hormozis everywhere that are listening to some of this stuff the other day, just about how much you charge, and that you charge more and the project is more likely to be successful because the client's more invested in making it a success. It becomes self-fulfilling. And it's almost that question somewhat does the same thing. It's, this person cares about it. There is someone there. It's almost, I'm thinking about how I'm going to use this information. And so then when you're talking to them about the strategy, they can themselves envision how it's going to actually get the outcomes, which is what they want ultimately at the end of the day.
If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.